Imagine standing alone in the blood-soaked fields of 1863 Tennessee, where the wind carries whispers of the damned. 73 souls vanished here, not in battle's fury, but swallowed by a family's insatiable greed. Was it human evil, or divine wrath calling them home? Feel the chill as we unearth the truth that still haunts these graves. In the sweltering haze of July 1863, while cannon fire echoed from distant Gettysburg like the thunder of an angry god, a quieter apocalypse unfolded in the verdant valleys of Middle Tennessee. Here, amid the undulating hills of Rutherford County, the air thick with the sweet rot of blooming cotton and the acrid bite of gunpowder drifting south, 73 lives were extinguished, not by the chaos of war, but by the cold calculus of ambition. These were not the chained souls of slavery's brutal ledger, nor the fallen boys in gray and blue uniforms, but ordinary folk, wandering laborers seeking refuge from famine, widows bartering their strength for bread, and inquisitive neighbors whose curiosity pierced too deep into shadows better left undisturbed. Their disappearances were no accident of conflict. They were orchestrated with the precision of a biblical plague, their essences dissolved into the earth as if judged unworthy by some higher power. Federal probes, shrouded in wartime secrecy and sealed away in dusty Washington vaults for generations, would later reveal a tapestry of horror woven from greed, deception, and perhaps the hand of Providence itself. What elevates this tale from mere tragedy to a spiritually haunting saga is the methodical erasure. Personal trinkets inventoried like spoils of conquest, bodies consigned to alchemical voids that denied even the mercy of a Christian burial. Tonight, we delve into the sanctified facade of Magnolia Hollow Estate, once known as Rosewood Manor, and unravel why the Chamberlain clan's wartime windfall rested upon a necropolis of unmarked tombs, a foundation cursed to echo with the unrest of the unavenged. Picture the scene: dawn breaking over the Cumberland Plateau, the first golden rays piercing through a veil of morning fog that clings to the ground like reluctant spirits. The estate sprawls across 2,000 acres of loamy soil, black as sin and fertile as Eden before the fall. The manor house rises defiant against the horizon, a Greek revival colossus with 8 Corinthian pillars soaring like the fingers of a giant hand reaching for heaven's judgment. Wraparound verandas on 2 levels cast long shadows, where rocking chairs creak emptily in the breeze, as if occupied by ghosts whispering accusations. Inside, the air is heavy with the scent of polished beeswax and aged tobacco, mingling with faint undertones of something sharper, more metallic, like the blood of sacrificed lambs. Hand-forged chandeliers from Parisian ateliers dangle crystals that refract light into rainbow prisms, dancing across walls paneled in heart pine harvested from ancient forests, each plank bearing the grain of time's inexorable march. Marble hearths, veined with quartz that glimmers like trapped starlight, stand cold despite the summer heat, as if the fires within fear to ignite lest they reveal hidden sins. At the heart of this opulent illusion stood Ezekiel Chamberlain, a man whose very presence evoked the archetype of a fallen angel. Tall, at 6 feet 2 inches, with hair silvered not by age but by the weight of unspoken pacts. His eyes, a stormy gray that pierced like daggers forged in hell's own smithy, held the gaze of those who dared meet them, stripping away pretenses to expose the soul's vulnerabilities. Born in 1821 to Josiah Chamberlain, a pioneer who clawed prosperity from Tennessee's wilderness, Ezekiel inherited not just land, but a legacy tainted by moral ambiguity. Josiah had built the estate in 1835, during the feverish expansion of cotton kingdoms, but whispers in local taverns spoke of his dealings with river pirates and land swindles that displaced Cherokee remnants, acts that some saw as the original sin staining the family line. Ezekiel, now 42, moved through his domain with the grace of a predator, his silk waistcoats tailored in Savannah hiding a frame honed not by toil, but by nocturnal labors that left peculiar scars on. His palms, ridges like those from handling caustic lies, symbols perhaps of alchemical pursuits, mirroring the soul's corrosion. His hands, though manicured, betrayed him. Faint chemical burns, etched like stigmata from experiments in dissolution that echoed the biblical dissolving of flesh in Gehenna's fires. He professed neutrality in the war, a chameleon pledging allegiance to neither Lincoln's Union nor Davis's Confederacy, yet his coffers swelled as if blessed by Midas or cursed by Mammon. Ezekiel's genius lay in duality, smuggling bales of cotton to rebel depots at premium rates, only to orchestrate interceptions by Yankee scouts, pocketing double bounties while the fibers stained with sweat and blood changed hands like Judas's silver. But this was mere prelude to darker machinations, where prosperity intertwined with perdition, and each golden coin carried the weight of a soul's damnation. Beside him reigned Margaret Chamberlain, née Hargrove, from Virginia's tobacco barons, a lineage steeped in the Old Dominion's aristocratic decay. At 39, her once ethereal beauty had transmuted into something forged in iron. High cheekbones sharpened by resolve, lips thinned from issuing commands that brooked no dissent, and eyes like polished obsidian, reflecting back the fears of those who served her. She orchestrated the household with martial precision, her ledger books, bound in calfskin, pages filled with spidery script, chronicling every grain of corn, every yard of calico, every flicker of candlelight. Yet these tomes omitted the midnight councils in the manor's library, where lamplight cast elongated shadows on leather-bound volumes of chemistry and theology as husband and wife plotted enterprises that flirted with the infernal. Margaret's faith, a rigid Calvinism inherited from Puritan forebears, twisted into justification, prosperity as divine favor, the weak as vessels for testing the elect. Her voice, when raised, carried the timbre of a prophetess, echoing through halls where servants trembled, sensing the spiritual storm brewing beneath her composure. Their progeny, the twins Daniel and Samuel, embodied the family's fractured soul, mirror images warped by nurture's dark hand. Born in 1842 under a blood moon that old midwives called an omen, they shared their father's intellect but amplified his flaws. Daniel, the firstborn by a scant quarter hour, was slender as a willow whip, his spectacles perpetually fogged from anxious breaths, framing eyes that darted like trapped birds. Educated in Knoxville's halls before secession's call, he mastered ledgers and laboratories, blending double-entry bookkeeping with formulas for acids that could erase evidence as cleanly as God's forgiveness erases sin. Or so he rationalized. His hands fidgeted with quills and vials, symbols of a mind that viewed humans as equations to balance, lives as debits to expunge. Samuel, broader and brutish, loomed like a biblical Goliath, his shoulders knotted from wielding tools of enforcement, whips, shovels, and worse. Where Daniel plotted in shadows, Samuel reveled in the visceral. The crunch of bone, the gurgle of last breaths, acts that stirred in him a primal joy bordering on ecstasy, as if channeling the wrath of Old Testament avengers. Yet even Ezekiel eyed his son's enthusiasm warily, sensing a recklessness that could unravel their web, much like Cain's impulsive strike doomed his line to wander. As spring 1862 thawed the frozen Cumberland, Tennessee descended into a maelstrom. Union boots trampled Nashville's streets, Confederate phantoms haunted the backwoods, and the river ran red with blockade runners' gambits. Plantations faltered, their bondsmen fleeing to freedom's promise or conscripted into gray ranks, fields lying fallow like unrepented sins. Yet Magnolia Hollow, Rosewood and Whispers, thrived, its fields a sea of white bowls swaying under azure skies, harvested by spectral crews who materialized at cockcrow and vanished at gloaming. Broad hats obscured faces, muffling identities in a veil of anonymity, while overseers barked orders laced with threats veiled as scripture. Idle hands invite the devil's workshop. The genesis of this enigma traced to Lincoln's Emancipation Whisper in September 1862, a decree that Ezekiel perceived not as liberation, but as opportunity's clarion. Foreseeing the dissolution of his enslaved cadre, he pivoted with serpentine cunning. Broadsides nailed to Nashville's lampposts and Murfreesboro's market squares, promising $2.50 daily, princely in wartime penury, plus sustenance and shelter. Steady work for steadfast souls, they proclaimed, evoking Proverbs' diligent ants. But the fine print, inked in blood-red cursive, bound signatories to 2 years' servitude, wages escrowed for safekeeping, a covenant that mirrored Faust's bargain. Desperation drew them like moths to hellfire. Irish immigrants fleeing potato ghosts, freedmen testing liberty's edges, yeoman farmers dispossessed by artillery scars. They arrived at the wrought iron gates, papers clutched in calloused fists, eyes alight with hope's fragile flame. Ezekiel greeted them personally, his smile a crescent moon promising providence, while Margaret noted details in her eternal ledger. Heights, scars, kinfolk, data that would later serve as epitaphs unspoken. The unraveling began subtly, like the first crack in a dam foretelling flood. In October 1862, Elias Thorne, a cooper from Smyrna, vanished after querying his withheld pay. His sister, Eliza, a seamstress with hands nimble as spiders, rode to the estate under a harvest moon, her horse's hooves clattering on gravel like accusatory knocks. Daniel met her at the portico, spectacles glinting in torchlight, spinning tales of Elias's desertion amid nocturnal revels. "Intemperance, ma'am," he drawled, producing forged affidavits scented with forgery's ink. Eliza's protests, "My brother abhorred the demon rum, swore off it after our mother's passing," fell on ears deafened by complicity. Sheriff Harlan Voss, a grizzled veteran of Mexican skirmishes, with mustache drooping like wilted magnolias, took her plaint at the county seat. The office smelled of stale coffee and yellowed warrants, walls papered with wanted posters fluttering in drafts. Voss, sensing discord in Eliza's tremor, saddled up for Magnolia Hollow, arriving as thunderheads gathered, mirroring his unease. Ezekiel awaited on the veranda, ledger in hand, as if divined by sorcery. "Anticipated your query, Sheriff," he intoned, voice smooth as aged bourbon, yet laced with arsenic's edge. Papers proffered, witnesses' marks, including Samuel's bold scrawl and a foreman's hesitant X, attesting to Elias's pilferage and inebriation. The documents pristine, dates aligned like stars in malign constellation. Yet Voss's nostrils flared at an anomaly. A caustic miasma wafting from distant sheds, acrid as brimstone, evoking tanneries, but laced with something profane, like flesh yielding to lie's embrace. It clung to the air, a spiritual stench, as if the land itself exhaled the fumes of Gehenna. "I maintain order as the Lord commands," Ezekiel proclaimed, snapping the book shut with finality akin to judgment's gavel. "Temptation lurks in idleness. We excise it root and branch." Voss departed under lowering skies, rain pattering like tears unshed, but doubt not his soul. Elias's reputation, pious, steadfast, clashed with the narrative, much like Cain's denial before the Almighty's query, "Where is thy brother?" As weeks bled into months, patterns emerged like constellations of doom. A miller's son gone after tallying anomalous yields. A midwife silenced mid-inquiry about nocturnal cries. Families entire, lured by promises, evaporating like mist at dawn. Neighbors murmured in church pews, voices hushed as prayers, fearing the Chamberlain's reach. Tithes to the local parish swelling suspiciously, buying silence from pulpits that preach forgiveness while ignoring the cries of the oppressed. Spiritually, the estate pulsed with undercurrents of divine reckoning. Ezekiel's library housed tomes on Paracelsus alongside King James Bibles, margins annotated with queries on transmutation, of matter, of morality. Margaret's prayers, overheard by scullery maids, invoked Job's trials, justifying suffering as refinement for the chosen. The twins, in private, debated predestination. Daniel citing Calvin's elect, Samuel reveling in the damned's torment as entertainment for the saved. Visually, the fields at twilight evoked purgatory. Workers' silhouettes bending like penitents, the gin house's machinery grinding with rhythmic menace, steam hissing like serpents. Sounds amplified the dread. Distant shovels scraping earth under moonless nights, muffled sobs echoing from cellars, the creak of floorboards and empty wings where portraits of ancestors gazed with accusatory eyes. Emotionally, the vanishings carved canyons of grief. Martha Wilkins, kin to a vanished laborer, clutching a locket with his curl, weeping in Murfreesboro Square, her sobs a lament for innocence devoured. Curiosity bred fear. Questions whispered in taverns curdled into silence, lest the inquirer join the spectral ranks. Historically anchored in Tennessee's fractured 1863. Union garrisons in Nashville, casting long shadows, Confederate raiders skulking. The Chamberlains exploited the anarchy, their empire a microcosm of war's moral void. Yet undertones of retribution loomed, crop blights in adjacent fields. As weeks bled into months, patterns emerged like constellations of doom. A miller's son gone after tallying anomalous yields. A midwife silenced mid-inquiry about nocturnal cries. Families entire, lured by promises, evaporating like mist at dawn. Neighbors murmured in church pews, voices hushed as prayers, fearing the Chamberlain's reach. Tithes to the local parish swelling suspiciously, buying silence from pulpits that preach forgiveness while ignoring the cries of the oppressed. Spiritually, the estate pulsed with undercurrents of divine reckoning. Ezekiel's library housed tomes on Paracelsus alongside King James Bibles, margins annotated with queries on transmutation, of matter, of morality. Margaret's prayers, overheard by scullery maids, invoked Job's trials, justifying suffering as refinement for the chosen. The twins, in private, debated predestination. Daniel citing Calvin's elect, Samuel reveling in the damned's torment as entertainment for the saved. Visually, the fields at twilight evoked purgatory. Workers' silhouettes bending like penitents, the gin house's machinery grinding with rhythmic menace, steam hissing like serpents. Sounds amplified the dread. Distant shovels scraping earth under moonless nights, muffled sobs echoing from cellars, the creak of floorboards in empty wings where portraits of ancestors gazed with accusatory eyes. Emotionally, the vanishings carved canyons of grief. Martha Wilkins, kin to a vanished laborer, clutching a locket with his curl, weeping in Murfreesboro Square, her sobs a lament for innocence devoured. Curiosity bred fear. Questions whispered in taverns curdled into silence, lest the inquirer join the spectral ranks. Historically anchored in Tennessee's fractured 1863. Union garrisons in Nashville casting long shadows, Confederate raiders skulking. The Chamberlains exploited the anarchy, their empire a microcosm of war's moral void. Yet undertones of retribution loomed, crop blights in adjacent fields, as if the land rebelled. Spectral sightings reported by patrols, wispy figures in cotton rows, harbingers of justice deferred. As federal eyes turned southward, whispers reached provost marshals, anomalies in cotton manifests, labor rolls that defied demographics. But wartime exigencies buried leads, much like the graves themselves, shallow pits in wooded hollows, limed to hasten oblivion, marked only by depressions where rain pooled like God's tears. The Chamberlain fortune, built on this abyss, glittered falsely. Balls hosted amid scarcity, silks from blockaded ports, while the unquiet dead fermented beneath. Themes of guilt threaded through. Ezekiel's insomnia, pacing galleries at witching hours, murmuring psalms of absolution. Margaret's rosary beads worn smooth from frantic tells. The twins' growing discord, Daniel's nightmares of rising specters, Samuel's defiant bravado masking terror. In this cauldron, empathy swells for the vanished, each a story truncated. Thomas Reed, blacksmith with dreams of forging plows for peace. Sarah Lowe, mother of three, seeking sustenance only to feed the earth. Dread builds with each revelation, curiosity pulling viewers. Deeper, Reflection on Sin's Legacy. How prosperity rooted in exploitation invites divine thunder. The manor's lights twinkled mockingly against encroaching dusk, a beacon of false hope, while in shadowed barns, vats bubbled with lies alchemy, dissolving flesh to bone, bone to dust, erasing mortals as if unwriting God's creation. Yet souls, immutable, lingered, their essence infusing the soil, waiting for unearthed truth to summon reckoning. This was no mere enterprise. It was a covenant with darkness, where cotton kings played God, reaping harvests of damnation. And as the war's tides shifted, so too did the winds of justice, carrying seeds of exposure toward the Chamberlain throne. In the shadowed aftermath of Sheriff Harlan Voss's uneasy departure from Magnolia Hollow estate, doubt festered like an untreated wound, poisoning the air of Rutherford County. The documentation Ezekiel Chamberlain presented was a masterpiece of deception, flawless in its forgery, each signature a stroke of calculated artifice, witnesses conjured as if from ether. In his 17 years wearing the badge, Voss had honed an instinct sharper than any bayonet, a sixth sense forged in the crucible of frontier justice and wartime betrayals. Now, it roared within him. The Chamberlains were architects of something profane, a veil of prosperity hiding abyssal depths. 3 nights later, under a sickle moon that cast the stone's river in silvery malice, Eliza Thorne's lifeless form was pulled from the currents, her skirts sodden, limbs akimbo like a discarded marionette. No marks of struggle marred her pale skin. The coroner, a bespectacled man with ink-stained fingers and a penchant for hasty verdicts, deemed it accidental, blaming swollen banks from relentless downpours that turned the river into a ravenous beast. Her mare grazed idly nearby, reins trailing in mud churned by recent hooves, oblivious to the tragedy. Yet Voss noted absences that screamed louder than any bruise. Eliza's embroidered reticule, repository of meager savings, gone, and the cherished tintype of her brother Elias, a sepia ghost she clutched like a talisman against despair, vanished into the void. Was it the river's theft, or human hands ensuring silence? The winter of 1862 to 63 cloaked Tennessee in a pall of frost and foreboding. The Cumberland's waters iced over like sealed confessions, while cannonades from distant fronts echoed as divine thunder. At Magnolia Hollow, the manor stood defiant, chimneys belching smoke from hearths fueled by ill-gotten wood, windows aglow with gaslight that mocked the surrounding hamlet's dim tallow candles. But in nearby Murfreesboro and Shelbyville, grief multiplied like biblical plagues. Families fractured, hearths empty, whispers turning to wails. Consider Elias Cartwright, a wheelwright from La Vergne, enticed in late November by handbills promising steady forge work amid the war's disruptions. His letters home ceased abruptly after one missive, penned in his looping script, assuring his ailing mother of bountiful meals and fair masters. When she dispatched a cousin to inquire in January, Daniel Chamberlain met him at the gates, spectacles perched on a nose sharpened by secrecy, proffering ledgers of desertion. Intemperance and theft, sir, tools pilfered under cover of night. The cousin departed unconvinced, the air thick with that persistent chemical tang, like vinegar laced with brimstone, wafting from outbuildings shrouded in evergreen screens. Then came Moira O'Brien, a flame-haired lass from Dublin's famine echoes, arrived in Nashville via coffin ships, her brogue thick as peat smoke. Hired in December as a laundress, she vanished mid-January, her trunk left half-packed in a boarding-house garret, letters to kin and county carry unfinished, inkpot overturned like spilled blood. The proprietress, a stout widow with rosary-calloused fingers, reported her glee at the grand estate where folk are treated as kin, yet no return for belongings, no farewell. Moira's disappearance rippled through immigrant enclaves, where tales of vanished countrymen fueled nocturnal prayers to saints for protection against unseen predators. Most harrowing was the Whitaker clan. Abel, a farrier with hands like anvils, his wife Lydia, midwife to half the county, their daughters, Ruth, 16, with eyes like storm clouds, and Miriam, 14, frail from scarlet fever scars. Lured in February by Ezekiel's broadsides touting family quarters and schooling, they sold their modest homestead near Franklin, wagon groaning under heirlooms, grandmother's quilt, father's Bible, silver spoons from a wedding long past. They trundled toward Magnolia Hollow under leaden skies, dreams of stability in chaos. Vanished. Utterly. No trace in toll records, no sightings at crossroads inns. When kinfolk queried, Samuel Chamberlain barred the way, his bulk a wall of intimidation, spinning yarns of contractual breach, quarrelsome lot, abandoned post after fisticuffs. Ledgers produced, witnesses sworn, overseers with averted eyes, field hands mumbling assent under duress. Each probe by Voss unveiled the ritual, Ezekiel's polished demeanor, documents pristine as fresh snow, alibis airtight as coffins. Victims evaporated, leaving spectral voids, tools abandoned, cabins scrubbed to sterility, as if the earth itself swallowed them in judgment for trusting false idols of wealth. Spiritually, it evoked the parable of the rich fool, hoarding barns full while souls withered, or Cain's mark, a family's lineage cursed by fratricide's echo. Voss pondered in his Spartan office, lamplight flickering on wanted posters yellowed like old bones. Were the Chamberlains agents of divine retribution, culling the desperate as wheat from chaff, or merely vessels of Lucifer, prosperity their golden calf? Amid this miasma, Elias Hawthorne, the estate's chief overseer, a colossus of a man, 6'4" with biceps corded from decades of lash and plow, began unraveling the threads. Born in 1818 to indentured stock, he'd served Josiah Chamberlain since the manor's cornerstone was laid in 1835, witnessing slavery's brutal ballet, whippings that striped backs like zebra hides, auctions where families fractured like shattered porcelain. Yet 1863's shadows dwarfed those cruelties, methodical, soulless, a machine of annihilation that chilled even his hardened core. Hawthorne's doubts crystallized in February, tallying rations, flour sacks enduring unnaturally, molasses barrels barely dipped, despite Daniel's rosters claiming 80 souls to feed. His private counts in the fields, under sun that baked soil to cracked pottery, yielded scarcely 40 bent backs, faces obscured by brims, voices muted as if fearing invocation. Revelations accumulated like storm clouds. Nocturnal processions at unholy hours, Daniel and Samuel gliding through quarters with oil lamps casting elongated demons on clapboard walls, flanked by two wraiths, sallow men in laborer's garb, yet with manicured nails and scholarly stoops, satchels clinking with metallic menace, evoking surgeons or alchemists from forbidden grimoires. These vigils presaged absences, cabins vacant at dawn, beds stripped, hearts cold, as if occupants ascended or descended in raptures and verse. On a stifling April eve, humidity thick as guilt, Hawthorne's suspicions propelled him into the gloom. Concealed in thorn thickets that tore at his homespun shirt, he trailed the twins to the hut of Josiah Grant, a freedman mechanic from Chattanooga, vocal about spectral gaps in the workforce. Grant's queries, where'd old Tom go, and that Irish gal, had rippled like heresy. The brothers slipped inside. Murmurs leaked, then silence heavier than lead. Emerging, they hefted a burlap shroud, sagging with unnatural weight, dark blooms seeping through weave like accusatory ink. Samuel grunted under strain, sweat beading his brow. Daniel scanned peripheries, paranoia etching his features. Hawthorne shadowed them past moonlit fields where cotton bolls glowed like phantom orbs toward the ancestral plot. A wrought iron enclave on a knoll, headstones gleaming marble sentinels for Chamberlain's past, inscriptions faded by rain's penitential tears. But they veered into wildwood, torchlight dancing ahead like will-o'-the-wisps luring to doom. From Oak's gnarled embrace, Hawthorne beheld the conclave, Ezekiel joining, patriarchal in frock coat, the pallid duo unfolding shovels. The sack descended into a yawning pit, pre-dug with mechanical foresight. One stranger uncorked a carboy, cascading translucent elixir. Quicklime's bite assaulting nostrils, acrid as hell's breath, accelerating decay to erase sin's evidence. Ezekiel intoned, voice a sepulchral rumble. 80 souls forged our realm, each a cornerstone in eternity's edifice. Tonight's offering secures legacy beyond war's ashes, as the Almighty rewards the resolute. Words twisted scripture, invoking Pharaoh's pyramids built on slaves' bones, or Babel's hubris inviting heavenly wrath. Pit sealed, sod disguised with foliage artistry, the cadre dispersed. Ezekiel to Manor's lighted sanctuary, others to a derelict silo repurposed, its silhouette squat against star-pricked sky. Compelled by morbid imperative, Hawthorne crept close, peering through splintered planks. Revelation assaulted. Interior a charnel workshop, lit by hooded lanterns casting jaundiced glow. Iron cauldrons bubbled with lime slurry, paddles stirring viscous horrors, grates sifting indissolubles, buttons, buckles, bones defiant. Tables arrayed with plunder, Grant's whittled pipe, O'Brien's Celtic cross, Whitaker heirlooms gleaming mockingly. A forge corner blazed, crucible melting trinkets to anonymous bullion, sparks ascending like fleeing souls. Dominating. Tomes of damnation, Daniel's copperplate chronicling not yields, but yields of flesh. Entries clinical as autopsies. Elias Cartwright, November 28, 1862. Forge Tools Pocket Watch, $52. Moira O'Brien, December 15, 1862. Brooch, Linens, $18. Whitaker Family, February 12, 1863. Wagon, Quilts, Silver, $210. Pages sprawled, tallying 73 extinguished flames. Harvest reaped at $5,200. Blood money, sustaining opulence while neighbors starved. Not desperation spawn, but engineered predation. A siren estate, baiting with wage vows, ensnaring the vulnerable in contractual webs, dissolving dissent in chemical Gehenna. Hawthorne recoiled, bile rising, realization dawning. Origins traced to 1860, pre-war whispers of accidents among bondsmen, evolving into this industrial abattoir. Spiritually chilling. Chamberlains as false prophets. Estate a modern Moloch demanding sacrifices for golden calves. Guilt's tendrils gripped Hawthorne. His complicity a millstone. Visions of Judgment Day, where ledgers weighed against feathers of truth. Cinematically, envision fog-shrouded woods, leaves crunching underfoot like brittle bones. Barn's interior a chiaroscuro nightmare. Shadows writhing on vats where bubbles pop with ghostly sighs. Sounds. Limes hiss, forges roar, pages turning like fate's decree. Emotions surge, dread coiling in guts, empathy for vanished. Cartwright's mother lighting vigil candles. O'Brien's kin across Atlantic aching unknowing. Whitaker's empty farmstead wind-howled. Curiosity propels narrative, reflection on sin's inheritance. How war's chaos birth monsters. Divine justice lurking in exposure's promise. Historically rooted. Tennessee's 1863 limbo. Union Nashville a garrison fortress. Countryside rebel-haunted. Emancipation's edict fracturing labor. Opportunists thriving in moral vacuum. Chamberlains exploited. Their dynasty a microcosm of exploitation's curse. Echoing antebellum atrocities amplified by conflict's anarchy. Yet unrest stirred. Hawthorne's witness a spark in powder keg. Voss's probe's tightening noose. Manor lights flickered, facade cracking, as unquiet dead whispered from lime-eaten graves, demanding reckoning in blood and fire. The system had not been born perfect. It had been birthed in panic, refined in blood, and sanctified by repetition. In the beginning, there were clumsy mistakes. A body too shallowly buried that dogs unearthed, a widow who asked the wrong preacher, a poisoned field hand who convulsed so violently in the quarters that 3 others witnessed it. Ezekiel Chamberlain hated waste and hated exposure even more. So like any good businessman, he iterated. Trial, Error, improvement, silence. By the winter of 1862, the operation ran with the cold precision of a Louisville slaughterhouse. Only the livestock walked in on two legs, clutching carpet bags full of hope. At the dark heart of this perfection stood two ghosts in human skin, Dr. Cornelius Polk and his younger brother Edgar. Former Confederate surgeons, they had vanished from the Shiloh casualty lists in April 1862, listed as missing, presumed dead. In truth, they had deserted, haunted by the screaming and the sawdust soaked with gangrene, and ridden south until Ezekiel's gold quieted their nightmares. Cornelius, tall, skeletal, with eyes the color of pond ice, had practiced medicine in Lexington before the war. Edgar, softer, almost boyish, had studied chemistry at Transylvania University and could quote the exact proportions required to reduce a human body to soap and memory. Together they became the high priests of the new ritual. A cotton mask soaked in chloroform pressed gently, almost tenderly, over the chosen worker's face in the dead of night. A syringe of morphine slipped between ribs if the mask proved too slow. Death that looked, to any corner pressed for time, like heart failure or fever. No bruces. Marks. No. Questions. They called it the quieting. Recruitment was an art form in itself. Advertisements ran in the Nashville Dispatch, the Murfreesboro Rebel Banner, even the Louisville Journal. Modest black-bordered boxes promising $2.50 per day found for honest laborers, unencumbered workers. The key word was unencumbered. Boarding house madams in Nashville's Smoky Row received a silver dollar for every Irish girl they sent south. Labor agents in Louisville earned $2 a head for widows with no kin. A preacher in Clarksville pocketed $5 for every freedman family he convinced that Rosewood Manor was God's provision in troubled times. Ezekiel kept a private notebook. Prefer no children under 12, too noisy. Prefer no living parents, too many letters. Prefer skilled trades. Hire resale on tools. They were not stolen at gunpoint. They were invited. They knocked on hell's door, carrying references. Elias Hawthorne, creaked to everyone who feared his fists, stood in the barn that April night and understood, with the clarity of a deathbed vision, that he had spent 30 years feeding a beast he mistook for a family. The ledgers lay open under a green-shaded lamp like a Bible written by Satan himself. Page after page of neat columns. Victim arrival method yield $, burial hashtag. Abel Whitaker family, February 12, 63, chloroform/morph. 210, plot 47 to 50. Moira O'Brien, December 31st, 62, chloroform only, 18, plot 39. Josiah Grant, April 9th, 63, morphine overdose, 37, plot 71. 73 names, 73 prices, 73 little wooden stakes hidden under leaves and kudzu. He was now a numbered cemetery only the devil and Daniel Chamberlain could read. Creek's boot heel came down on a loose plank. Crack! The sound detonated like a cannon in the stillness. Inside the barn, every voice died. Who's out there? Daniel's voice, thin, precise, deadly. Samuel, dogs. Now. The hounds exploded into the night like black-furred demons, chains clanking, saliva stringing from crimson gums. Creek ran. 30 years on this land, and he ran like a frightened boy, crashing through blackjack, oak, and poison ivy, breath sawing in his throat, the way it had the night his own father whipped him for spilling molasses. Behind him, Samuel's roar rolled through the trees. Flush him, damn you. He knew every deer trail, every sinkhole, every plank bridge over the creeks. But pain and terror make even familiar ground treacherous. His foot caught a root. He pitched forward, leg folding beneath him with a wet pop that tore a scream from his chest. He tumbled into a limestone crevice no wider than a coffin, mud closing over him like a premature grave. The baying grew louder. Lanterns bobbed between the trunks, yellow eyes in the dark. Samuel's voice, closer now. He can't have gone far. When we find him, we'll say he fell from his horse, checking fences. Tragique accident. Edgar Polk, trembling. What he's already talked. Ezekiel, calm, always calm. Then we will simply have more work to do. But Creek keeps to himself. No one will miss an overseer. Creek pressed his face into the cold mud and waited for the teeth, for the boot, for the quieting. Instead, he heard hoofbeats, measured military. A single Union cavalry carbine clicked in the darkness. Drop the lanterns. Hands where I can see them. Corporal William Hayes, 4th Ohio Cavalry, had been watching the plantation for 72 hours from a ridge half a mile away. What he had taken for Confederate cotton smuggling had just revealed itself as something far worse. He found Creek broken and babbling, half delirious, clutching Hayes's stirrup leather like a drowning man. They're killing folks for pocket watches and wedding rings 73, ledgers, quicklime. Please, God, you gotta stop him. Hayes slung the big man across his saddle and rode hard for Nashville. Creek biting a rag to keep from screaming every time the horse jumped a log. At first, the provost marshal thought it lunacy, a Confederate trick, an opium dream. But when Creek, leg splinted, face gray with pain, drew a map from memory showing 73 numbered stakes, when he recited names, dates, burial plots, tool values down to the penny, even the most skeptical major felt ice crawl down his spine. May 15th, 1863. Dawn. A full company of the 18th Ohio Infantry, bayonets fixed, surrounded Magnolia Hollow while the morning mist still clung to the cotton like the breath of the dead. Creek, propped on crutches, led them to the barn. The doors swung open on hell. Vats still steamed faintly with quicklime. The air was sweet-rotting, chemical, unforgettable. On the tables lay the last harvest. A child's shoe, a woman's thimble, a Freemason's ring, a worn Bible with Whitaker, Franklin County, 1841 inscribed on the flyleaf. The ledger's 6 thick volumes waited like patient demons. And pinned to the wall, in Ezekiel's elegant copperplate, post-war expansion projections, estimated annual intake 1866 to 1875, 200 to 250 souls. Projektet groß, $18, 000 bis 22,000 per annum. Reconstruction will be the greatest harvest this nation has ever offered. The soldiers, men who had seen Antietam, Shiloh, Perryville, stood silent. One vomited against the barn wall. Another crossed himself, though he was Methodist. But the house was empty. Sometime between midnight and cockcrow, the Chamberlains had vanished. Ezekiel, Margaret, the twins, riding south on blooded horses, taking only saddlebags of gold ingots melted from wedding rings and a single valise containing the most incriminating pages torn from the ledgers. They left the cotton, the crystal, the slaves turned servants, the portraits of ancestors staring down in oils that suddenly looked like accusations. 3 days later, 2 bodies floated face down in the Cumberland near Harpeth Shoals. Cornelius and Edgar Polk, throats opened ear to ear, pockets weighted with stones. The Chamberlains, it seemed, believed in tying up loose ends. Excavation began at sunrise on May 18th and lasted 21 days. Railroad engineers ran temporary track into the woods. Spades bit earth that gave too easily. Stake number 1 yielded a blacksmith's hammer, and a pocket watch stopped at 11:07. Stake 23 produced the bones of an entire family still clasped together. Stake 71, Josiah Grant, was only a jawbone and a silver cross. The quicklime had done its work well, but not perfectly. Enough remained for mothers to identify sons by a missing tooth, for wives to recognize husbands by the twist of a wedding band fused to fingerbone. 73 stakes. 73 stories. 73 reasons why, on quiet nights, the wind through the cotton fields of Rutherford County still carries something that sounds almost like human voices. The Chamberlains were never caught. Some say they reached Texas. Some say Brazil. Some say they simply stepped off the edge of the world, carrying their fortune and their damnation with them. But the ledger survived, and the land remembers. The quicklime had whispered its final incantations over the unearthed pits, reducing flesh to spectral whispers and bone to fragile relics. Shards of femur etched with the alchemy of decay, scraps of homespun cloth clinging like desperate prayers unanswered. Yet these remnants, unearthed under the relentless gaze of Union shovels, bore witness enough. A rusted pocket knife, identifying a blacksmith from Memphis, a child's porcelain doll head staring blankly from the soil, a tarnished locket spilling forth a curl of auburn hair that once framed a young mother's face. In the spring haze of 1863, as federal engineers mapped the desecrated woods with theodolites and chains, families converged on Rutherford County like pilgrims to a profane shrine. Widows clutched shawls against the chill wind, carrying the scent of turned earth. Their eyes, hollowed by months of vigil candles, burned low. One by one, they knelt at the numbered stakes, fingers tracing fragments that confirmed the unthinkable. Brothers, daughters, husbands not lost to war's random fury, but harvested in a calculated reaping. Closure came not as balm, but as a thorned crown. Grief transmuted into rage, souls demanding vengeance from a God who seemed to have turned his face away. The probe peeled back layers of deception like onion skins, revealing rot at the core. What emerged was no isolated abomination, but a web spun across the fractured South. Tendrils reaching to Nashville's fog-shrouded wars where steamboat captains pocketed bribes to ferry unwitting laborers, to Memphis's bustling markets where slave auctioneers turned labor brokers whispered of prime opportunities at Magnolia Hollow, northward to Louisville's immigrant tenements, where Irish priests, swayed by Chamberlain donations, preached of Providence in Tennessee fields, even westward to St. Louis, where newspaper compositors inserted glowing ads for a cut of the blood money. This network, operational since late 1861, had funneled over 100 souls into the maw, yielding profits that gilded the family's exile. Silks from Parisian looms smuggled past blockades. Wines from Bordeaux cellars sipped in crystal goblets while neighbors rationed cornbread. Ezekiel's ledgers, seized and poured over in Nashville's provisional courthouse amid the acrid smoke of oil lamps, tallied not just cotton bales, but human yields. $6, $800 in total, a fortune built on the calculus of damnation, echoing the biblical merchants of the temple, profiting from sacred trust desecrated. Federal wrath descended like the plagues of Egypt. Provost marshals, hardened by Shiloh's carnage, orchestrated a manhunt spanning the sundered nation. Wanted broadsides nailed to every telegraph pole from the Potomac to the Rio Grande, daguerreotypes of the family. Ezekiel's stern visage, Margaret's unyielding stare, the twins' mirrored malice, distributed to sheriffs and scouts alike. Rewards swelled to $5,000 in gold, a king's ransom in wartime penury, luring informants from Confederate camps and Union garrisons. Whispers chased shadows, a sighting in Matamoros, Mexico, where silver-haired gringo bartered cotton for passage south. Tales from Mobile's docks of a family boarding the steamer Eclipse under forged passports, bound for Liverpool's foggy keys, even rumors of them vanishing into the wilds of the Ozarks, living as hermits haunted by their deeds. Yet the Chamberlains evaporated like mist at dawn, their trail dissolving into myth. Historians, sifting through Reconstruction archives in the dim vaults of Washington, speculate divergent fates, perhaps ambushed by rebel partisans branding them Yankee profiteers, bodies consigned to unmarked ravines, or felled by Union patrols with shoot-on-sight orders, just as swift and undocumented. Or, more chillingly, escaped to Brazil's coffee fazendas, where Confederate expatriates whispered of a wealthy planter from Tennessee living under a veil of assumed nobility, their stolen ingots seeding new empires on foreign soil. The truth? Buried deeper than their victims, a spiritual enigma. Did Providence strike them down in divine retribution, or did they mock heaven's gaze, prospering in anonymity as the rich man in Lazarus's parable, oblivious to the gulf of judgment awaiting? Magnolia Hollow, once Rosewood, fell under the Union's iron fist, its opulent halls repurposed as a field hospital for the maimed and fevered. Picture the irony. Marble fireplaces, once warmed by logs felled by vanished hands, now cradling cauldrons of boiling bandages. Crystal chandeliers refracting the groans of amputees, where once laughter echoed at lavish soirees. verandas overlooking fields now sown with the seeds of redemption, parcels divided among freedmen and war widows, their plows turning soil that still whispered of blood. Black and white toiled side by side under Reconstruction's tentative sun, forging a fragile community from horror's ashes. Cabins rising where graves once hid, harvests shared in defiance of the curse. Yet the manor itself lingered like a spectral sentinel, columns gleaming white as bleached bones against Tennessee's verdant hills. For 2 decades, it stood vacant, windows shattered by storms or vandals, floors creaking under unseen feet. Locals shunned it, murmuring of apparitions. Flickering lights in upper chambers at midnight, cries echoing from empty cellars like the wails of the unburied, tools flung by invisible hands during renovation attempts. Workers fled, hammers abandoned mid-swing, claiming an oppressive dread, like the weight of 73 accusing stares that sapped their will. In 1885, the Nashville and Chattanooga Railroad claimed the land, dynamite blasting the structure to rubble for a switching yard, iron rails snaking over the site's profane heart. Today, amid Murfreesboro's bustling avenues lined with chain stores and neon signs, a modest bronze plaque stands sentinel, erected in 1967 amid civil rights marches, in remembrance of the lost souls of Rosewood Manor. Their spirits endure in eternal vigil. Commuters hurry past, oblivious, but on moonless nights, old-timers swear the ground hums with unrest, a spiritual chill reminding that some sins seep into the earth, unerasable. Elias Hawthorne, creaked to history's pages, emerged from the shadows not as villain, but reluctant redeemer, his limp a perpetual sacrament of that fateful night. The fracture in his leg, splintered like truth-piercing deception, never knit true, leaving him to hobble through life on a hickory cane carved from the very woods that nearly claimed him. He settled in a modest cabin on the estate's fringes, now a freehold granted by grateful Federals, where he devoted his twilight years to mending fractured families. By lamplight's flicker, amid the scent of piped tobacco and yellowed affidavits, he pored over manifests, dispatching letters to distant kin. Your brother rests here. Come claim his peace. Testimonies at military tribunals in Nashville's fortified halls echoed his gravelly voice, establishing precedents for war crimes, concepts that would resonate in Nuremberg's distant future, where organized evil faced judgment scale. Accomplices fell, a Memphis broker hanged for complicity, a Louisville printer imprisoned for his poison ads, sentences bartered for confessions that mapped the web's full venom. Yet Creek's soul bore scars deeper than flesh. Insomnia plagued him, visions of bubbling vats and ledger ghosts invading dreams, a psychological Gehenna where guilt's flames licked at his indirect complicity. He shunned marriage, fatherhood, human warmth. Neighbors whispered a man shadowed, eyes distant as if gazing into abyss, trust eroded like quicklime on bone. In 1891, 28 years post-revelation, he was discovered slumped in his rocker, a final testament clutched in rigor-stiff fingers, sealed for the Tennessee Historical Society. Open upon my passing, that truth may outlive me. The document, unfurled in a hushed archive room amid dust motes dancing in sunlight. Unveiled horrors veiled even from tribunals. The 73? Mere ledger ghosts. Creek estimated over 100 souls claimed, vagrants vanishing from riverbanks, runaways lured from underground railroad stops, immigrants fresh off packets with no tongues to tell tales. Targeted were society's fringes, the least of these in Matthew's Gospel, whose absences stirred no ripples, no sheriff's inquiries, no mourning processions, just silent voids in the war's cacophony. He confessed his own delay, suspicions brewing for seasons, rations unconsumed, nocturnal lanterns flickering like fallen stars, workers evaporating like dew. Yet fear of the Chamberlain's grip, their tendrils in courts and churches, silenced him until fate's crack of would forced action. Most damning, whispers of kin operations elsewhere. Arkansas rice plantations dissolving to centers and lye pits, Georgia mills grinding more than grain, Louisiana bayous swallowing whole crews. Unverified. These rumors hinted at a southern underbelly. Wartime anarchy birthing myriad Molochs, where greed's idols demanded human sacrifice. Historians, combing post-bellum records, find echoes. Unexplained labor shortages, spiked prosperity amid ruin, but proof elusive as the Chamberlains themselves. A spiritually chilling prospect that evil flourished unchecked, divine oversight seemingly absent in humanity's darkest hour. The Chamberlain saga endures as American history's bleakest parable, a testament to evil's banality. Not raving lunatics, but ledger-bound merchants trading lives for luxury, reducing imago Dei to inventory lines. Ezekiel, the patriarchal serpent, wove justifications from warped scripture. Prosperity as election sign, the poor as chaff for burning. Margaret, iron matriarch, orchestrated with domestic precision, her prayers twisted invocations over vats. The twins, Daniel, the scribe of souls, finding solace in columns where others saw sin. Samuel, the brute reveling in the wet work, his hands stained like Cain's. The Pope's perversion, medicine turned murder, mirrors Judas's betrayal, knowledge sold for silver. Had Creek's boot not betrayed him, the machine might have churned eternally, hundreds more consigned to Lime's embrace, the family ascending to post-war baronies. Their evasion underscores justice's frailty, celestial scales unbalanced, mortal courts impotent against cunning flight. Legacy lingers like spiritual incense. Legal frameworks forged for prosecuting syndicates, from mafia dons to genocide architects, cautionary tales of vulnerability, wars displaced, like modern refugees, prey to exploiters. Victims embodied the everyman. Artisans dreaming of forges alight, mothers weaving futures from threadbare hopes, all trusting in America's promise only to meet its shadow. In Reconstruction's forge, amid emancipation's joys and lynching's terrors, Rosewood whispered that battlefields held no monopoly on atrocity. Civilians, cloaked in respectability, could orchestrate hell's more intimate, more insidious. This chronicle unmasks evil's guise, ordinary faces masking monstrous hearts, commerce veiling carnage. Vigilance, then, is faith's mandate, watching the vulnerable, questioning prosperity's roots, lest history's cycles repeat. What echoes in your soul from this tale? Did the Chamberlains meet shadowed justice, or evade it eternally? Were others such dynasties swallowed by time's mercy? Share below, kindred seekers of dark truths. If this saga stirred your spirit, subscribe for more immersions into history's abyss. Notify, share, and remember, monsters walk among us, cloaked in cotton-white innocence. Until shadows call again.